Hello and welcome to the program. The last for the year 2023. It's 2 days before the end of the year and we shall be looking back and projecting into the new year 2024. I am Imonia Marere. The year 2023 has been described by some as a tumultuous year all over the world, a challenging one to humanity. It has witnessed wars, civil strife, natural disasters, economic and social upheavals, and climate-induced emergencies with devastating impacts on lives and livelihoods. Man-made disasters have also wreaked havoc on millions of people, especially the most vulnerable. There have also been rising humanitarian and refugee crises around the world. Human rights violations, religious, political, and racist extremism with negative impacts on social behavior, as well as poor accountability and rising power injustices at local, national, and global levels. Now, back home in Nigeria, the year saw a rancorous general election and for some, a contentious democratic transition from one administration to another. But despite all the doomsday predictions, the country is still standing, albeit in a harsh economic climate and an unhealthy security situation. Politics, rather than governance, appear to have dominated national life in 2023. Insecurity especially has not abated, with mindless killings, banditry, terrorism, and other forms of crimes on the swing. One of the man-made disasters that has plagued Nigeria over the years has been corruption. It appeared to have been elevated in 2023 in both the public and private sectors, but particularly so in the judicial arm of government. Would there be a paradigm shift in 2024? What should Nigeria's trajectory be in its domestic and foreign policies in 2024? Can governments at different levels make a big difference in the lives of their people? Join us as we reflect on the year that was and what 2024 holds in stock for the global community. And I'm joined in the studio at this time from my left, Owe Lakemfa, a journalist, former General Secretary, Nigeria Labour Congress, former Secretary General, Organization of African Trade Union Unity, OATU, President, Society for International Relations Awareness. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Also with us is a familiar face who's been with us on this program all through the year. Indeed, both of them have been on this program several times this year. My second guest is Dr. Hussein Abdul. He's a country director, CARE, a development and development expert and a humanist, a humanitarian specialist, and a public intellectual. Thank you so much for finding time to join us.
Thank you. Thanks
Right.
for having us.
And compliments of the season, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, so let's begin this way. How would you describe the year 2023? For you, what did it connote?
A very difficult year, just like the primer you provided, both locally and internationally. We've seen massive escalations of violence across different segments of the country, with strong implications for poverty, for exclusion, and for deepening dislocation of majority of the people. You take it from Europe, through Asia, or through Africa and Latin America. It's been different phases of crisis induced by the ravaging globalizations that is anchored on a particular economic model that continue to sap not just the people, their resources, but also the climate itself. And so even the climatic crisis that we talked about cannot be looked at in isolations from the character and the nature of accumulations that people have, the overproductions, the massive accumulation of a particular segment that is continuously impoverizing the other segment. And you look at it at different levels, both vertically and horizontally. Vertically at the level of individuals around the world, where some people are having it good. They're enriching, they're getting much more higher in terms of resource accumulation. Majority of the people are also, on the other side, getting poorer and poorer. And the same thing you find on the horizontal lane in terms of nation states, where some part of the world are becoming rich and richer. The other parts of the world are also getting poor and poorer. And therefore, even when we talk about climate change in conversations, you can actually not discuss it in isolation from the nature of economy, nature of production, the nature of accumulation. The same thing, the violence, the conflicts that we're experiencing, whether globally or locally. In Nigeria, for instance, we did mention that quite well. Yes, it didn't start in 2023, but we also know the extent of escalation that we have experienced, whether you talk about the Northwest or what is happening now in the North Central. Many times we discuss this in relations to people's fight, community to communities fight, and the gory story that comes from it. But again, we don't look at the structural character of this violence. So the same thing about the nature of our politics and all that is shaped by how we manage our collective resources. We have seen how poverty had continued to deepen in the country, unemployment escalating, even while some people are counting GDP this, GDP that, and the percentage of GDP growth, whether it's 1% or it's 3%. But for the poor, the concern is that the poverty is accumulating. Exclusion is actually increasing. And therefore, their lives and their livelihood are continuously being damaged by the way resources are managed and by the policies that people are put in place. So the year has been extremely difficult, any angle you look at it. We started the year with this whole currency swap thing in Nigeria, and we know how that impacted on the lives of people until the court intervened. Then we had an elections that was also a bit rancorous, and that also shook the country. Eventually, we had a transition, and then we had a very quick policy reversals that actually had come up, and with strong implications for what we are discussing, for poverty, for exclusion. Two major policies: removal of subsidy in the petroleum product. There are debates on whether there is subsidy or no subsidy in the first place. But the major challenge is that we remove the subsidy in the product, and then at the same time liberalize our foreign exchange, and therefore you are also not refining locally. So what that means is that as we import within the prevailing market rate of dollar, then surely naira dollar being outperforming the naira, is that the price will keep shooting up, and therefore inflation has massively escalated. So the little that people have been sapped off by the rapidity of the inflation, and you could see how life has looked like. And then we saw the year ending with a massive violence in Plateau. And that, for me, is a difficult year.
Mm. So, Owe, how would you summarize 2023?
It's like some tragedy for the Nigerian people. The country was on autopilot under President Buhari, virtually no control. And we were happy elections were coming, and we're going to have a new leadership. But the Tinubu administration that has come has not shown us it has taken control. So that's the main problem we have. It hasn't its own roadmap that you can see, that they can show us. Rather, they are relying on some young men in the World Bank, in the IMF, who are telling them this is what you should do. And by the way, they are the people applauding. They are telling Tinubu, you are doing very well. If the enemies of your people are telling you are doing very well, then you must think twice and tell yourself that, no, this is not the direction to take. So in any direction you turn, we have that problem. Whether it's education, the number of people out of school, the number of people endangered, and even insecurity in the schools. Anywhere you turn to. Look, it's a basic thing that we rely a lot on you know, on field, on PMS, you know. And so when that shoots up, the farmer cannot get to the market easily. If he gets to the market, it's at a very high cost. And things are so bad that while under Jonathan, you could buy a bag of rice for 7,500, now it's 68,000, and you are not sure what you are buying. You are not even sure. So it's a tragic thing for all of us. And the thing is not to blame the government, but to tell the government you are not doing the right thing, and you should do the right thing. The direction of the Tinubu government, you can see from the quality of people it has appointed, you know, to ministerial positions. Some of them are questionable, you know, and it's not very good. And so you do not see bright people being appointed. There are good people, there are bright people there, and that's what I'm saying. But you see people who, with conviction, who can turn us to a different direction from what we have been doing. If Tinubu has come to do the same thing we are used to, then there's no use in the change issue. And so something has to be done. We have to change. We have to look at the interest of the country. We have to look at the interest of the region. We have to look at the interest of Africa and say, where are we headed to? In Nigeria, Nigerians are suffering. Look, inflation, I'm not too sure what percentage it is now, but it rose to, I think, up to 22.8%. Yeah. You know, can you imagine that? Under Jonathan, we are still arguing whether it should be single digit or double digit. Now you've gone all that way. It's incredible. And a country like Kenya is saying that inflation is high, we have 6 point something. Are you serious? In the same continent, doing the same things, on the same ideological plane? So it's a major problem for us. And I don't think we should, you know, necessarily say, look, you are not doing very well. No, it's a problem that we all face. And we must all come out and say, look, this is not going well. Things must change. Like I said somewhere else, this whole thing about democracy is an investment by the people. People are investing. When you say you are democracy, why would I go and vote if I do not think things will be better for me? So people are going to vote based on the basis that things will be better. So the democracy, the votes we are doing, we are investing, you know, our future. And so we must get dividends. If we do not get dividends from what we are doing, it's useless. Because if democracy is threatened in any way, it is only the people that can stand up and fight it and defend it. And so the people must have a stake or know they have a stake in this system. When they have a stake in the democratic process, then they will defend it. If they do not have a stake, then they will just, you know, they just do what they call, so they don't look, like Bola used to say. So we're all endangered in all aspects. And I think for a country that is borrowing and going for loans, it doesn't make sense to spend so much buying cars, building offices. The World Bank announced that it's giving loan to the, I think, Finance Ministry to buy stationery as well. Ridiculous. So if you are poor and you need to go to a money lender, or you take a loan, and you are so richly attired, the man you are going to talk to has come in a small car, and you are coming in the latest SUV, bulletproof. And not just for you, for your entourage. I'm sure for the National Assembly, we must have bought about 400 and something. Does that make sense? For a country that is economically distressed.
At 160 million per one.
At 160 million per one, assuming that is all. So you can multiply that, then the one that goes to other arms of government, the executive and other things like that, the government must know there is an economic emergency and must not behave as if he's a child of a rich parent that has a lot of money to spend. Nigerians are suffering.
All right, Dr. Abdul, the argument has been made that in every election year, such as we had in 2023, that hardly does governance take the front row. And that it's politics all the way, even after inauguration on May 29. What we have been witnessing has been more of politicking than of governance. But again, they also point to the fact that that we are able to transit from one democratic administration or dispensation to another is a big credit, particularly in Africa, where, and on the West African, in the West African sub-region, where coups have become almost a common thing in recent times.
Yeah, I think it's a crisis of our own variant of liberal democracy. I'm calling it a crisis because, again, the differential understanding of what democracy means to us by politicians and by citizens. Citizens and the politician, on the other hand, see democracy differently. The citizens' conception of democracy is like what Comrade already described. It's a product of their struggles, and therefore it is expected to provide certain things that they have been struggling for. So democracy is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. And that end for them is a better life, is security, is education for their children, is proper health services, is good infrastructure. This is what some people like to describe as dividends of democracy. So there's a reason for democracy. But for politicians, democracy is an end in itself. So politicking has become their own understanding of what democracy means. So you are in a perpetual state of elections. That's what it means. So when you are elected, now you inaugurate a new government, then you start the process of another elections. So what you do all through is in relations to the next elections. So when you are appointing ministers or you are appointing commissioners in your state level, you are looking at how does that benefit me electorally. That's what you are looking for. Even when you want to manage diversity, which is very important in a country like ours, when you are trying to manage diversity through those appointments, you are also doing it in relation to how it adds value to your electoral potentials. So therefore, when you do that, all you are doing is just politicking. No governance. Governance requires certain level of statesman or stateswomanship, recognizing the imperative of changes that are required to make lives better, even if they are so difficult in some cases. Recognizing that you are elected for a purpose and committing yourself to that purpose. So, but when you don't do that, when you are in the state of perpetual or permanent electoral politics, politics is everywhere. So I'm here referring to electoral politics, is that you do things that in many cases are actually inimical to the whole essence of democracy. Corruption comes in because you need to continue to lubricate the wheel of that election or that electoral politics that you have found yourself in, and therefore you have to pick the public resources and invest in that process continuously. Whether you call it palliative or you call it empowerment and all those things, you still have to continuously source for public funds that you will inject in that. And therefore, the strategic focus on big-time structural issues that can lead to big changes, you're just not concerned with that. And therefore, the rot continues to deepen. Look, with all honesty, I've been telling my friends, those in government, that look, the crisis we're dealing with in this country in the last 20 years is just unimaginable. We don't have a public service. The civil service infrastructure has completely collapsed at both state and at national level, with due respect to some decent people in public service. But the structure, that engine room that sustains government has collapsed under the weight of politics completely. So that's the crisis. And therefore, there is no technical capacity or technical interest to drive things, to recommend sustainable public policies and implement them. When policies are being initiated, they are being initiated for political reasons, and therefore they are politically implemented. So that structural buffer, that drive, that energy, that technical skills that is required to implement public policies in a more sustainable manner, the essence, because that's the whole primary purpose of actually having the civil service. So if you don't have that, when people are more concerned about their promotion and they're more concerned about what they are able to access and what ministry is more lucrative and which one is not that lucrative, therefore, the interest has shifted. The interest is no longer citizens. The interest is not longer the government. The interest has shifted to those individuals, their immediate families, and probably their communities, probably if they are interested. So it's a big crisis. We are assessing 2023 years, is true, but the reality, this calendar is just a continuum. It's just that we broke up, but it continues that allows us, the calendar just gives us a certain convenience of time to appraise things, but the reality is a continuum. Like in your primer, you ask whether this is going to continue or it's going to end. It's actually going to continue because we can't see any structural, concrete interest to transform. And this, if we have to transform, the process leading to it have to be citizens-driven. It's not government. And that is where the dilemma is.
So, wait, now let me pick up something from what Dr. Abdul talked about now, managing our diversity. How did we do in 2023? How well did we manage our diversity on all fronts, whether in terms of politics, religion, ethnicity, what have you? How did we manage that against the backdrop of the many crisis situations that we have on our hands today, whether in the northwest, northeast, north central, south, southeast, wherever? How have we, whether the previous administration or under this administration?
I think like Dr. Abdul said, we've just had a continuum. That, you do not have fundamental changes. You get it. Under President Buhari, some people thought it was their turn to run the system. As friends, as people from the same area, that has not fundamentally changed.
So the turn-by-turn system is still there?
It's still just on. Now you can just trace that through, you can just see the trajectory of it all. That is the main problem that we have. And people are angry. Take the situation in Plateau and in Benue. We know what the problem is. We all know it's not about elders, farmers. No. There's an attempt at land grab. We know that. Now we know that the people in Benue and Plateau found the bulk of the Nigerian armed forces over the years, especially the middle Kedar or the lower Kedar. So why are they not fighting? Why are they not defending themselves and their lives and their families? And they are not doing that because they do not have the arms to do so. Those who are attacking them are coming from outside, and they are armed. And when government says, okay, let's mop up arms, and they go into the villages and seize the weapons people have, those who are attacking them are in the forest. They still have their weapons. Look, there's no way this situation will change unless, because the government is not capable, has not shown itself as being capable to defend lives of people. And so you must also entrust part of that to the people to defend themselves. I've said it a number of times, because when you look at a place like Niger State, some 100 or so people come on a motorbike, shooting to the air in the marketplace, and thousands of people simply vacate the town. And then they go to the next town and do the same thing. Not more than 100 people on motorbike. And you have tens of thousands of people displaced. Why can't those people be in a position to defend themselves? Especially when we cannot defend them. So we have to. So We just come up and say, oh, look at the tragedy in Plateau, it's outrageous. And then we wait for the next massacre to occur. So there's a problem there. The whole thing about whether there's subsidy or not, like it said, it has to do with the fact that we are not refining petroleum products. It's a very simple matter.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those who are refining on their own, who have the technology and the manpower and the knowledge, are being burnt that they are illegal, refineries. Is it not possible to put these people together into cooperatives? Is it not possible to get some OND students to study the process and refine it and ensure that it's environmentally friendly? And that such cooperatives can discuss with the NNPC and see how they can assess crude oil, which is because the government says they are using illegal means. So can't we do that? Are we not thinking? And that is the problem that we have. We throw money at things where we don't have money. We simply just gloss over it. And then things are getting worse and worse and worse. And so I, as a Nigerian, I do not know how I come into this government to say, look, this government has this vision. Let me key in. How do I do that? I don't understand the vision because none has been provided. Under Awo, I knew that people knew that, look, Awo, he had this vision and the key in. We are going to have free education and everybody starts, okay, fine. Under Jakonde, I could understand that. And Jakonde could tell you that, look, there are so many children out of school in so number of years. We'll have this number of schools, this number of teachers. And then he projects it onto, okay, when they get to this level, there'll be too many of them who can get to the university. So let's provide the university. That's how he planned. But when you just talk to people, don't worry, things will change. People worry. And change will come only for those who are alive. People are dying. And so what we need is some program, some plans, which you and I and everybody in society can share, and then work towards it. But what we're all doing now, we don't know what's going on, everybody and then there are people telling you things are getting better, don't worry. We are not getting anywhere. And it's not helping anybody, including the government. So that's part of the problems that we have.
Dr. Abdul, let me push the issue of management of diversity a bit further. In 2023, we did see a lot of crises and killings in different parts of the country. In the southeast, for instance, there were issues of stay at home and unknown gunmen and all manner of things. In the northwest, banditry has practically taken over some of the states, and terrorism has not abated in the northeast. Of course, the north central case is well known, which Owe has talked about. Could we have managed our diversity better in 2023?
Absolutely, yes. We could have managed our diversity better. Despite some of the underlying drivers of the violent crisis or conflicts that we have been experiencing almost in every part of the country. Take, for instance, the situation in the southeast. What the situation in the southeast had required, particularly from the former government, is probably a presidential engagement and having a conversations, and because it's not just the violence by the militant element in those locations, but there is a general perception or reality, depending on where you see it, of exclusion. And when you create that atmosphere that gives room for that kind of perception, pervasive perception of one segment of the country that they have been calculatedly or deliberately excluded from the scheme of affairs, you create room for situations like this. And in a diverse society, such perceptions of exclusion is actually a reality. You must, once there is that pervasive perception, the debate is not whether you go out, it's true, it's not true, you have this, no. is actually to admit that it does exist. That's the principle, a fundamental principle of diversity management. That when perception gets pervasive, you must accept it as a reality. And when you take it as a reality, then it gives you room to deal with it. Even when that perception comes out to be untrue, it is the process of dealing with it that will expose that maybe this is not probably true. And I think we didn't do that. We allowed for the situation to escalate. And we are where we are because there hasn't been any deliberate process of dealing with these things. Secondly, and I'm still speaking to the Southeast concern, is also our almost lack of capacity to close out any crisis situation. We just move on. Whatever happens, whatever the calamity that happens in this country, there is never a closure. You just relive, you move on. You had a civil war, a devastating one, lasted 30 months, 3 years. Millions of people died. I am not sure that as a country, we had a closure. We never did. Yes, the war ended. We roll out the triple R. People are free to analyze whatever happened within this process. But there hasn't been a systematic closure of that. In a diverse society, you have to have a systematic closure. It doesn't happen in one day. It cannot happen through military decree. It's a continual process until you arrive at a certain level of closure. You've had violent conflicts in different parts of the country, whether it's Kaduna or it is in Plateau or all that. There's no closure. All you just do, set up a committee, and then the judicial, whether it is judicial or it's administrative, they go, they do this, and they issue a report. In one of my studies, was basically consecutively for about 4 different judicial commissions in Kaduna, for instance. They are almost the same terms of reference. It is same terms of reference. You use that to calm situation down, and then you move on until another crisis erupts. The same thing we have in Plateau. In the Northwest is a crisis that I don't really think that authorities actually understand. In fact, the media use of what is that description they call it, banditry, and the criminalization, which is actually a crime, of course. I'm not trying to say no. It's called a crime. There is no other way to describe those wanton killings and displacement and all that. But again, that criminal interpretation, simplistic criminal, let me just use that, simplistic criminalization does not allow for a nuanced understanding of what is actually going on to even allow for a proper solution to deal with the situation. Part of the crisis is that, look, we talk more about the state crisis, the collapse of the state, but you see, we never pay attention to the collapse of communities. There is a pervasive crisis of communities. The whole notion and the concept of communities has collapsed. And therefore, the social glue that helped to tame people and create an atmosphere of control has collapsed. The state does not exist in isolation of communities. So the fundamental glue, because what we call community, is that there are glues that keeps it. So once those glues are weakened, then you lose what we call social control. Social control at the community level have collapsed. And it has collapsed over a period of time, and therefore the socialization that have ensued in some of these places is no longer a community socialization. There is no sense of community emerging. In fact, there is even no sense of family. So it's a social crisis that has created this whole criminal enterprise. an underground economy of banditry that people are benefiting from, because the victims and the perpetrators actually are people who know each other. They are product of the same community. It's not an invasion in the Northwest. It is not an invasion. It is people who have lived together, who speak the same language, who are of the same faith, who have lived in the same geography over a period of time. And what we should be doing is asking the fundamental question, what happened? How did we get to where we are? Yes, we can talk about the whole process of state failure over these years, exclusion, neglect that has happened, but there is a deepening crisis of community, which is very fundamental to even the survival of the state itself. In Plateau, it's the same kind of dynamics that you have seen over the years. When a particular chain of violence is not contained, because the violence is a social process, it continues to morph. It continues to morph. So you have the whole process of herders-farmers conflict, which hasn't been properly managed over the years, and then it morphed and led to cattle rustling, and which is also a big issue and has become a big economy in that region over the last 15 years. And that morphed again as dislocation and exclusion increased. Then another set of violence around banditry of people who have lost their possessions. And so it's a complex web of issues and transformations of violence that have happened over a period of time, coupled with increasing access to small arms and light weapons that has pervaded the region, occasioned by multiple crises in the Sahel and in North Africa and now in Europe. And so people access arms so easily and therefore deploy it for criminal activities. There was a bandit that was interviewed on Daily Trust, if I'm not forgetting, and they asked him, where do you get your arm? And he said, look, it is easier to get an arm than to actually buy bread.
It's in the open market.
It's in the open market. If you cannot afford to buy, you can rent. You rent arms, and then you go commit crime, and then you return the arm and you pay. So, and there's a whole syndicate around it. So I think we have failed to invest adequately in understanding the phenomenon. And therefore, our approach to it is just go bomb them. Go wipe them out.
A knee-jerk approach.
That kind of typical fire brigade approach that we have. So from Niger to Sokoto, to Katsina, to Zamfara, and all those places, they are not occupation. People are not coming from anywhere. They are same people. And so that for me is a crisis. It's not, there are element of diversity concerns. So if that kind of crisis erupt in Zamfara, look, people die in their hundreds. Look, even the media got tired of reporting. In the Northeast, in the Northwest, in Katsina, people in their hundreds. 20 villages can be raided at the go by this same number you're talking, 100 people on motorbike. They raid and they carry them. But when in those axes, because that's part of our diversity concern that we also need to do, that's a diversity dimension. When it happened in a relatively homogeneous setting, the diversity narrative hardly comes. But when such things happen in a context that is relatively heterogeneous or that is diverse, then a we versus them actually emerge. That ordering, you are different from us. the perpetrators are different from
The victims.
From the victims. So where the perpetrators and the victims are the same, it doesn't come up well. And we've seen those instances in Niger, in Katsina, in Kaduna, and now in Plateau. There are differential interpretations of the same kind of incidents that are actually happening. Even in Zamfara, there were attempts to even provide a narrative that tries to differentiate between and say it is the Fulani who are the perpetrators versus the Hausa people in those places. There will be things of it in terms of occupational narrative where the Fulani happens to be the bulk of the elders where that happened, but the context is slightly different. So I think it's that understanding that hasn't come up, and we're finding it difficult to find a solution to it. And the answer very quickly, in the Northeast, is what we have been dealing with for over 13 years now. And you had a government that lasted for 8 years, Buhari, who actually thinks that they have to be defeated. You can't negotiate with terrorists, like they often argue, or at best they say our doors are open, even when we don't see any door open. There are things that the government could have done, and I hope this government is thinking around that could have done to probably stop this whole situation.
So that takes us away to trying to find solutions in 2024. What exactly do you think that this government, this administration, can do to better manage our diversities and reduce, if not completely eliminate, all the crises and upheavals that we have had over the years?
Well, first it's about perception. In the Northeast, for instance, in the East, for instance, amongst the Igbos, there are people that, of course, some type of injustice have been done against them. We all know that. And rather than address that, people feel marginalized, whether you like it or not. And rather address that, we thought we could deal with maybe a mass-up and take them to prison. And so when you lose a mass-up, then you have
An IPOB.
An IPOB. And rather than address that, you abduct the man, their leader, put him in prison for nothing, and then an EPA or what was the other man comes up. So you always have a worse scenario. And when the Tinubu administration came in, I wrote an article to say, look, please do not inherit these problems. The first thing is have a discussion, and with Ohanaeze and co. and this gentleman, Nnamdi, free him, discuss with him. Like President Yar'Adua discussed with some of the people in the Niger Delta, the job militants. He discussed with them and said, what do we do? And that goes on to other places. I've argued, for instance, that it does not make sense for us to continue to detain Ezra Zaki and his wife after killing their 4 children and undress this, and this is borne by judicial panel. Hundreds of his followers are killed. And you say keep him, and they can say, as far back as 2015, free him. And you say continue to hold him. And so I did not think that Tinubu administration needed to inherit those kind of things. And as part of way forward, there are tens of villages and towns occupied by new people in Benue, in Plateau. So you want a peace in that place. Those who are in the IDP camps must be returned to their homes. And the way to return that is that the armed forces must go back and take over those towns and villages and restore people to their homes. And so if you are new people, you want to try to be there, it can be discussed and negotiated. I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I believe in the unity of all African countries, all African people. So it's not about saying something should not come. No, I don't have any problem with that. I even think that we should have so much borders that people can go around, but it cannot be at the expense of other people. So the Tinubu administration, I say, should not inherit these things. Also, the Tinubu administration should not see, like he said, banditry as just sending soldiers and policemen. No. It has to be a communal thing. the best people that can, address this kind of massacres is the people themselves. And that is why I think initiative in this, like Amotekun, it's quite good. So we cannot throw money at things. We cannot shoot our way through things. Since we cannot do that, we need to sit down, think, and bring everybody on board and see how we can move on. Otherwise, everybody goes there to protect his own self or speak for his own people, or some people he thinks, you have no solution to that. You should just continue. So we have a good, in my own view, a very good opportunity for us to rethink and possibly reset. And then we move on from there.
So in 2024, what do you think the vision of government and the Nigerian people should be?
I think I'll start from where comrades stop. I think we need to tame this whole violent conflicts that we're experiencing in different parts of the country. It is affecting the lives of the people. It is contributing to our deepening poverty and exclusion. And so insecurity should be a major focus of the government. And there are lots that can be done. I'll build on the community approach that he talks about. I actually think that the federal government or the National Assembly should legislate to allow for state policing. And I think that will allow for an institutionalized mechanisms for managing the whole process of some of this structure that state governments are establishing. The governments are establishing vigilante groups in their respective states. Katsina being the latest. Hundreds of young people have been recruited, probably going to be armed. In Borno, for a long while, you have the civilian JTF. Who have been involved in the counter-insurgency in that region. In Plateau, there have been vigilante groups. In Benue, a different stream have been set up. We have the Amotokun in the southwest of the country. I think people are doing this also because we have this whole notion that we should only have one police force. But I think the crisis of this country has led to a situation where we must have. And the reason why we need that kind of constitutional amendment to allow for it is that there has to be a nationally coordinated mechanisms around that. Because part of the crisis, for instance, in some of the states where we are having this banditry, is that even when vigilantes are recruited, they are recruited perceptively from one ethnic stock. And therefore, instead of helping to manage the situation, it ends up compounding it. Because once the vigilante gets involved, arrest, detain, kill the other side, they don't see it as vigilante per se. They just see it as one group versus the other group. So that coordinated and national mechanism to deal with this will really, really help us through. The second is our economy. I actually think that this is really very important. It's even important to even managing and dealing with our security situation. Because no country can maintain a secured polity with the poverty level
that we have in
the country.
It's
not possible. Anyway.
Okay. Beyond the economy and the security that we have so harped on, what would you think? Two other things, for instance, that you think we need to focus on in 2024?
I think the out-of-school children should be brought to school. It's so important. These are the people that are used for political violence. Get it? And if people are educated and have some work, it's difficult for you to tell them to go out. So we really need that. But most important of all is that we need a plan. You see, we are just groping in the dark. The government needs a vision. And there are so many knowledgeable people in this country. So that if we're able to come together, have a vision and a plan, then we can put in place implementation strategies to say, this year, this is what we are going to do. This year, you know, a programmatic thing. We need it.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, for your time. Well, we've been speaking with Uwe Lakenfa, journalist, former General Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress, former Secretary General, Organization of African Trade Union Unity, OATU, President, Society for International Relations Awareness, and of course, Dr. Hussaini Abdul, Country Director, CARE, a development and humanitarian specialist, and a public intellectual. Thank you so much for your time. And do have yourself a wonderful new year.
Thank you.
All right?
You too.
And our last line here for you, we should ask yourself in the new year, just 2 days before the new year, you should ask yourself this question. What did I do for Nigeria in 2023? We have been focusing so much on government, but as individuals, we should ask ourselves the question, what did I do for Nigeria in 2023? What did I contribute to Nigeria's progress in 2023? For some people, it has been all about criticisms, denigrating the fatherland, and abusing other persons, especially on social media. Now, spend the remaining 2 days of the year to think and to strategize on how you can best contribute to Nigeria's unity and to Nigeria's progress and world peace in 2024. Have a wonderful new year. We'll see you in 2024. Bye for now.